panels coming up. Our next panel is titled Youth, Digital Media and Design. And we have three really compelling and great presentations in line. So first off is Dr. Melissa Brough and Dr. Ioana Literat. Melissa's from California State University, Northridge, and Ioana's from Columbia University. And their presentations is From Ethical to Equitable Design, Amplifying Youth Voices in Digital Technology Design. So.
Thanks so much, George. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you're all upping the caffeine after that delicious batch of carbs for lunch. I'm so grateful to Catherine for setting up my talk so well. My name's Melissa Brough. I'm an assistant professor at Cal State Northridge, and I don't actually have an extensive background in design, although I've done some work in participatory design. But I come, and my co-author also come more from the digital media and youth sort of research space. And so I feel that she set an excellent foundation for me to build on here today. So today I'm going to be presenting findings from the first phase of an ongoing research project that is entitled From Ethical to Equitable Design, Amplifying Youth Voices in Digital Technology Design, which I'm doing with Ioana Literat of Teachers College at Columbia University, who unfortunately cannot be here today. So I recently asked a 21-year-old Chicana undocumented undergraduate student in Los Angeles what she imagined the designers of social media platforms looked like. Her answer was definitely white, smart, educated, young, wearing a tux, driving a nice car, not using much social media themselves, sharing limited information about themselves. Sounds about right, minus the tux. Now, thanks to extensive news coverage of Mark Zuckerberg's testimony before Congress earlier this year, many social media users are now aware of some of the privacy concerns raised by social media platforms. In fact, a quick review of recent headlines makes clear that Silicon Valley is experiencing a crisis of ethics beyond just privacy concerns, many of which we've heard about today already, whether it be in relation to racially offensive filters, Snapchat, the perpetuation of gender and racial inequality through search engine algorithms, Google, et cetera, discriminatory advertising tactics, Facebook, the inability to stem the circulation of fake news used to manipulate elections and fuel ethnic conflict, Facebook, Twitter, the list goes on. Although youth of color, especially Black and Hispanic youth and young women, are among the heaviest users of social media technologies, their voices are almost entirely absent from current conversations about how to design more ethical social media platforms. These demographic groups are the least represented among digital technology developers who are predominantly white male adults. Digital ethics is also about digital equity, and because technologies inherently reflect the values and ideologies and profit motives of those who design them, these statistics suggest that we also have an equity problem. So this research project examines underrepresented youth's perspectives on their own social media use as a way to inform more ethical and equitable design of digital platforms. Specifically, we're asking, what are the considerations relevant to youth from underrepresented groups, including youth from low-income families, youth of color, and young women, that should be factored into the design of more ethical and equitable social media platforms for these demographics? Of course, what's considered ethical and equitable technology depends on the perspective and the cultural context of the user. Maintaining colorblind perspectives on digital participation, for example, risks, to quote André Brough, who will be speaking shortly, normalizing whiteness and othering everyone else. Such insights challenge a central assumption of approaches to design in the field of human-computer interaction, the association of universal design with equity. Since the 1990s, calls for universal design in technology and other sectors have tended to focus on access and usability for users of varied physical and cognitive abilities. Yet contemporary scholarship problematizes the normative assumption that universal design will necessarily lead to more equitable technologies, given the inherent ideological and social biases of technology designers. Instead, we join those who are working to center difference rather than obfuscate and universalize it. The insights I'm going to share with you today are based on analyses carried out by youth themselves. And in the first phase of our research, we conducted an analysis of digital technology autoethnographies, or self-studies, produced by 151 undergraduate students at a Hispanic, Asian American, Native American, and Pacific Islander serving institution in the southwestern United States, where more than half of the students are low income and the majority are from traditionally underserved groups. Over the course of a semester, students in a class on communication and technology carried out autoethnographies of their uses of a particular digital communication technology. And perhaps not surprisingly, most of them chose to write about Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. Students kept weekly journals and then wrote analytical essays reflecting on their relationships to and experiences of the technology. We reviewed all 151 autoethnographies for emergent themes and selected a subset of the most relevant ones, those that directly discussed a topic related to the ethics or equitability of digital technology design. 18 autoethnographies were selected as case studies, and consent was obtained from those authors to include them in a systematic analysis. 41% of these 18 students identified as Hispanic or Latinx, 18% as Asian or Asian American, 14% as Black or African American. 61% received need-based financial aid for tuition, and 47% were first-generation college students. One was a former foster youth. 2/3 were students who identified as female. One student identified as homosexual. So this presentation is based on a systematic analysis of this subset of autoethnographies. And today I'm just going to share a few of the insights that emerged from these youth's self-studies with regard to how vectors of difference can inform more ethical and equitable digital technology design. Former Google employee and digital ethicist Tristan Harris points out how social media platforms are typically designed to be akin to slot machines with intermittent variable rewards through push notifications and other features. And this poses, of course, ethical concerns for all users, but the financial stakes are higher for low-income youth. Some students, for example, described how difficult it is not to check their social media accounts while at work, despite the fact that doing so might threaten their employment upon which they and their families were dependent. And similarly, maintaining a professional image in the same online spaces in which youth socialize with peers is not a challenge that is particular to low-income students, of course, yet the potential stakes of mismanaging these boundaries are clearly higher. As one student described, "I was up for a promotion, which would have given me a $2 raise from my hourly wage, but when my supervisor, along with the director of my department, saw my photos online, they decided not to give me the promotion nor the pay raise because I made my department look unprofessional from the photos they saw of me." Designers could do more to support young people in navigating and managing these often blurry boundaries, a challenge that's amplified by young people's limited experience of professionalization in the workforce. For under-resourced youth, online social networks may offer particularly important tools for building social capital, yet this may also heighten the stakes of opting out if, for example, contacts and reputation or status markers are non-transferable if they deactivate their accounts. So for example, one student who described himself as addicted to Reddit wrote that he was tempted to opt out of Reddit, but doing so would mean losing his karma points and his gold membership, in addition to losing access to his own posts and earned influence. Another student documented the technical obstacles to opting out, for example, having to deactivate your account from a computer rather than from a mobile phone, a challenge if you don't own your own computer. In this sense, designers should make it easier for users to deactivate their social media accounts, either temporarily or permanently, and consider ways to alleviate the costs of opting out, for instance, by offering the ability to export personal content and contacts or regain earned or paid member status. Ideally, designers would go further and consider how to design social network platforms that help lower-income youth grow their social capital without holding that social capital hostage should they choose to opt out. In addition to the particular ways in which lower-income youth experience social media, we found important differences in terms of race, gender, and other social identity markers, of course. A theme across the autoethnographies was the fact that the design of social media platforms encourages peer-to-peer monitoring and self-surveillance and fuels a need for social validation through feedback mechanisms such as likes and responses. And youth recognize these features as having a negative impact on their sense of identity and their social relations. This was particularly pronounced in the case of Snapchat, where users can see who read their posted content, and among youth with non-dominant identities who experienced a heightened social pressure to conform to dominant social norms. One student observed, quote, "I found myself policing my behavior in real life and on Snapchat, and taking my behavior on Snapchat as a guide to how I should perform being a half-white, half-Filipino female in reality." Similarly, a gay Hispanic male wrote about molding his behavior online in order to appeal to the masses and generate likes. He wrote, This slowly proved to be problematic as I realized I was policing myself in order to hide my real self due to constant years of shame and humiliation by society based on my sexual preference and race. I was diminishing my ability to accept myself due to my fear of being rejected and isolated. Designers could do much more to consider and address the ways in which design features contribute to heightened social pressures to conform to dominant social norms, particularly for youth with non-dominant identities. In other instances, however, design features like hashtags aided in the creation of collective identity and solidarity through, for example, niche groups like feminist fandom communities on Reddit or hashtag-based networks like Black Girl Magic on Twitter. Writing about the latter, one student discussed the impact of the hashtag Black Girl Magic community on herself and her peers in, quote, spreading positive and encouraging messages to Black women while creating an awareness in the community that is not told in mainstream society. In still other cases, youth felt isolated by personalization algorithms like those used by Facebook. They noted that their experience of more diverse content on Tumblr was key to exploring their own identities as they were exposed to perspectives different from their own. In this instance, centering difference in design means intentionally exposing users to content outside of their filter bubbles. So these are just some of the insights voiced by students in their autoethnographies. Their experiences shed light on key concerns for designers of technology who are willing to address questions of difference in order to design more ethical and equitable platforms and avoid universalizing their own assumptions. So we contend that future research on ethical and equitable design of digital technologies should not be overly universalizing, but should be people-centered and attend to the lived experiences of social, culturally, and economically diverse youth. And it should bring youth voices directly into the conversation in a similar vein as what Catherine was speaking to us about before. The next phase of our research builds on these insights, working with a new sample of youth, and so we welcome any feedback at this stage. Thank you so much.
So next up, we have Dr. Jennifer Rosales from Georgetown University.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to read this so I stick to my time limit. So as many of you in this room know, media literacy includes the development of competencies to access, analyze, evaluate, and create media. There has been a rise of attention given to media literacy as the quick fix solution within the United States since the 2016 elections, as the public becomes more concerned with fake news, sharing of private information, political polarization, and non-transparent media industry practices. Scholars have demonstrated that a media literate public cannot solve the large systematic issues alone. Yet they have also revealed how media literacy has fallen short in supporting people to actively participate in a media-saturated and dependent democracy. For example, Dana Boyd argues that media literacy perpetuates public uncertainty and distrust because fundamentally it is a form of critical thinking that asks people to doubt what they see. Other scholars worry that a media literacy focused on technical skill building without critical attention to the values, interests, and ideological implications of media usage only perpetuates uneven power dynamics and participation gaps between capitalist elites and marginalized groups. Media literacy advocates argue that a comprehensive media literacy includes critical thinking and technical skill building. However, this combination does not necessarily ensure ethical formation and action. A media literacy that focuses too much on what is wrong with media can lead young people to feel cynical and apathetic, while too much focus on use and creation can lead students to perpetuate false assumptions that media engagement is a value-neutral process. Through social media and online platforms, young people show constant and immediate concern by liking a cause and reposting and sharing articles. Yet as education scholar Harry Boyd and media education scholar Paul Mihaildis assert, there's an agency gap between concern and capacity to act. This presentation examines how integrating higher education theories and frameworks from value-based inclusive pedagogies can strengthen media literacy for college students. I specifically turn to community-based learning, contemplative education, and Ignatian pedagogy. I propose the use of these frameworks, these pedagogical frameworks, to integrate pro-social and ethical attitudes into knowledge production. These frameworks can be applied to the digital network spaces to address concerns such as agency gaps, participation gaps, and the transparency of media. These pedagogies also tackle the ethical challenge of keeping up with the dynamic digital landscape that changes the professional and social preparation young people need for their increasingly public roles as media makers and community participants. As smartphones and social media have become ubiquitous, they're affecting young people's mental health and ways of socializing. According to psychologist Jean M. Twain, the current generation of young people across race, class, and gender lines is less likely to experience physical danger, but more likely to suffer from depression and anxiety in comparison to previous generations. Twinge discusses how young people today worry about being left out of what they witness others having fun online, due in part to the constancy and immediacy of communication and information. Maheldis also addresses young people's self-consciousness amongst peers online. When posting online in an increasingly polarized environment, he explains that certain online practices such as meme culture and hashtag activism have, as he says, facilitated an ecosystem where yelling and vitriol are favored over reason and reflection. In fact, there is little to no time